Admiral Hyunwoo pressed his clawed hands against the cold metal railing of the bridge, watching the view screen with growing unease. The massive Zephyrian warship, Dominion's Edge, hung in space like a predator waiting to strike. But there was nothing to hunt. Earth floated before them, silent and dark, completely different from what their spies had promised. "This can't be right," Hyunwoo muttered, his voice carrying the weight of 300 years of military experience. The Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, and every single one had fought back. Ships would swarm out to meet them, desperate. Transmissions would flood the channels, and planets would light up with defensive fire. But Earth? Earth was quiet as a tomb. Lieutenant Jae-min hunched over his control panel, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly as he ran the scans for the 5th time. Sweat beaded on his blue-scaled forehead, despite the cool air of the bridge. "Admiral, I've checked everything twice. The sensors aren't broken. There really are no orbital stations, no defense platforms, no weapons pointing at us. Nothing." The young officer's voice cracked slightly. He'd been so excited about this mission, bragging to his friends about how he'd helped conquer the famous human homeworld. Now he just looked confused and scared. Commander So Young walked over from her station, her boots clicking on the metal floor. Her violet skin had turned pale, almost grey, which happened when Zephyrians got nervous. She'd been with the Empire's fleet for 50 years, but she'd never seen anything like this either. "Sir, this doesn't make sense," she said, pulling up, a holographic display between them. "Our intelligence network spent decades mapping human space. They reported 12 billion humans living on Earth alone, with colonies on 37 different worlds, mining operations, trade routes, military bases, everything a growing civilization should have." She waved her hand, and the display showed red dots scattered across local space, each one representing a human world their spies had identified. They were supposed to be expanding, building up their forces. "Our agents said they were getting ready to push into our territory within the next 50 years. Hyunwoo's mandibles clicked together, a nervous habit he'd developed over the decades. The sound echoed slightly in the quiet bridge. "Then where are they all?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Every crew member on the bridge had stopped what they were doing to listen. This was supposed to be a routine conquest. Show up, with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and add another species to the Empire's collection. Instead, they'd found ghost worlds. "Maybe they saw us coming and ran," suggested Ensign Taeho from the communications station. He was young, barely out of the Imperial Academy, and still believed that problems had simple solutions. So Young shook her head. "Impossible. Our jump drives are faster than anything humans have. Even if they detected us the moment we entered their space, they couldn't evacuate entire planets in time. And why would they abandon their homeworld anyway? Species don't just give up everything they've built." Hyunwoo studied the image of Earth on the main screen. The planet looked perfectly normal from space. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. The polar ice caps were the right size. The atmosphere showed normal composition. If anything, it looked healthier than most inhabited worlds the Empire had conquered. Usually they found planets choked with pollution, scarred by war or stripped bare by mining operations. "Take us closer to Mars," he ordered. "Slowly." The red planet had been terraformed by humans over the past few centuries, turned from a cold desert into something that could support life. Imperial intelligence had marked it as a major colony world, home to nearly 1 billion people working in the massive mining operations that carved through the planet's crust. As they approached, the details became clearer and more disturbing. The cities were there, sprawling across the Martian surface in perfect geometric patterns. The atmosphere processes were still running, keeping the air breathable. The transport tubes that connected different settlements looked intact. But there were no lights in the windows, no ships moving between the cities, no signs of life anywhere. "It's like they just stopped," whispered Jae-min, his voice barely audible. "Everything's there, but nobody's home." Hyunwoo had seen abandoned worlds before, but those had been destroyed by war or natural disasters. Ruins told stories of struggle, of final desperate battles or slow decline. This was different. This looked like an entire civilization had simply decided to walk away from everything they'd built Begin deep scans of both planets, he commanded, his voice steadier than he felt. Full spectrum analysis. I want to know what happened here. The bridge became busy with activity as the crew began their work. Sensor arrays extended from the ship's hull, powerful enough to detect individual life forms on a planet's surface. Energy scanners swept across both worlds, looking for any sign of technology or power sources. After an hour of intensive scanning, the results were even more puzzling. The planets showed clear signs of recent habitation, food production facilities that had been running until very recently, transportation systems that were still active, even entertainment broadcasts that had been cut off mid-transmission just weeks ago. But as the sensors dug deeper, they found something that made Hyunwoo's blood run cold. Every piece of advanced technology was gone, not destroyed, not damaged, simply removed with surgical precision. The humans had taken their computers, their manufacturing equipment, their weapons, their spacecraft, even their medical devices. They'd left behind only the most basic infrastructure needed to keep their cities from falling apart. "Sir," Jae-min called out, his voice tight with worry, "I'm detecting energy signatures from Earth's surface, but they're strange." The young officer's hands trembled as he adjusted his controls. "The readings are coming from multiple locations around the planet, major cities mostly, but the energy patterns don't match anything in our databases. They're not fusion reactors, not antimatter cores, not any kind of power source we've ever seen." On the screen, false color images showed swirling patterns of energy flowing beneath Earth's surface. They moved like living things, pulsing and shifting in ways that seemed almost random, but somehow purposeful. "And, sir," Jamin continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, "whenever I try to focus our sensors on them directly, the patterns change. It's like they know we're watching." Captain Minho stepped off the transport shuttle onto the cracked pavement of what used to be Seoul's busiest street. The silence hit him like a physical blow. No honking horns, no chattering crowds, no rumble of traffic. Just the soft whisper of wind moving through empty buildings that stretched toward the sky like the bones of some massive creature. His boots echoed strangely in the quiet as he walked forward, each step seeming too loud in a city built for millions. Behind him, his landing team spread out in formation, their weapons ready but somehow feeling useless against the oppressive emptiness that surrounded them. "Stay alert," Minho called softly to his team, though he wasn't sure what they were supposed to be alert for. Ghosts, maybe. The city looked like it had been frozen in time, preserved like an insect, trapped in amber. Sergeant Da-un, a tough veteran who'd fought in 12 different campaigns, walked beside him with her scanner beeping softly. She kept glancing around nervously, something Minho had never seen her do before. "Captain, this is really getting to me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen war zones, plague worlds, even planets that got hit by asteroid strikes, but this is different." They passed a row of shops with their lights still on, displays still showing the latest fashions and electronics. A restaurant had tables set for dinner, with cloth napkins folded neatly beside each plate. A children's playground sat empty, with swings moving gently in the breeze as if invisible kids were still playing. "Look at this," called out Private Seok Jin from across the street. He was standing outside a small cafe, his face pressed against the window. "The coffee machines are still running. There's steam coming from the cups on the tables." Minho walked over and peered inside. Sure enough, several tables had cups of coffee sitting on them, still warm enough to fog the air above them. A newspaper lay open beside one cup, folded to the sports section. A pair of reading glasses sat next to it, as if someone had just stepped away for a moment. "When did the humans leave?" Da-un asked, checking her chronometer. "Our intelligence said the evacuation happened weeks ago, but this coffee can't be more than an hour old." The team moved deeper into the city, documenting everything they found. Cars were parked perfectly in their spaces, with no signs of panic or rush. Traffic lights continued their eternal cycle of red, yellow, and green, controlling traffic that would never come. In one intersection, they found a food delivery scooter, parked beside the curb, its thermal bag still warm with someone's lunch order. "Captain, you need to hear this," called technical specialist Byung-ho from inside a communications building they'd been exploring. He was hunched over a bank of recording equipment, headphones pressed to his ears. Minho joined him and put on a spare set of headphones. What he heard made his skin crawl. It was a human voice speaking in their strange musical language, but the tone was urgent, almost panicked. "Can you translate any of it?" Minho asked. Byung-ho nodded, his face pale. "It's a public broadcast, from what looks like their government. They're talking about something called the Great Departure. They're telling everyone to gather at specific locations, to bring only personal items, and to leave everything else exactly as it is." The recording continued, and Byung-ho's expression grew more troubled. "They're saying this isn't an evacuation, Captain. They're calling it transformation. They keep mentioning coordinates, but not to any planet or star system. They're talking about dimensions, about stepping outside of normal space-time." Minho felt a chill run down his spine. What else? The strangest part is how calm they sound. This isn't a species running from an invasion or fleeing some disaster. They sound excited, like they're going somewhere they've always wanted to go. The team continued their exploration, finding more evidence of an organized, methodical departure. In residential areas, homes were left perfectly clean and organized. Beds were made with military precision, dishes were washed and put away, and even garbage had been taken out. But every single piece of advanced technology was gone. They didn't. "Just leave," observed Dawoon as they searched through an apartment building. "They cleaned house first. Look at this. They removed their computers, their communication devices, even their medical equipment. But they left behind books, photographs, art, music recordings. They took the technology but left the culture. In the basement of what appeared to be a university, they found something that changed everything. The room had clearly been some kind of research laboratory, with empty spaces where expensive equipment once stood. But the walls were covered in something that made Minho's eyes water just looking at it. Geometric patterns covered every surface, carved deep into the concrete and metal. They weren't painted or drawn. They'd been burned into the walls with some kind of energy tool, leaving edges that still glowed faintly with residual heat. The patterns seemed to move when you looked at them directly, shifting and flowing like liquid mathematics. Dr. Young-soo, their xenoarchaeologist, approached the walls cautiously. He was an expert in ancient alien civilizations, someone who'd spent decades studying the mysterious ruins left behind by long-dead species. But even he looked shaken by what they'd found. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted, pulling out his analysis tools. "These patterns, they're not decorative. They're not art or religious symbols. They're functional, mathematical. But the mathematics is all wrong." He pointed to a section of the wall where the patterns seemed to spiral inward on themselves. "Look at this. These are coordinates, but they're describing locations that can't exist in three-dimensional space. It's like they're mapping places that exist between dimensions, in the gaps between reality." As Young-soo worked, the team's equipment began acting strangely. Scanners flickered and displayed impossible readings. Communication devices picked up signals from empty space. Even their weapons targeting systems began showing ghost targets that weren't there. "Doctor, step away from those walls," Minho ordered, but Young-soo was transfixed. "Captain, I think I understand what happened." "Here," the scientist said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "The humans weren't just studying these patterns, they were using them. This whole room is like a massive calculation engine, computing the mathematics needed to move between dimensions." "Move between dimensions to where?" Minho demanded. Young-soo turned to face him, his eyes wide with realization. "Somewhere else entirely, somewhere that exists outside our normal universe. The humans didn't flee, Captain. They found a way to leave reality itself." The patterns on the walls seemed to pulse brighter, as if responding to their conversation. Minho felt a strange pulling sensation, like gravity trying to drag him in directions that didn't exist. Around the room, his team members looked queasy and disoriented. "Everyone out," he ordered. "Now!" As they retreated from the laboratory, Minho couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stumbled onto something far bigger than a simple evacuation. The humans hadn't just left their worlds. They'd discovered something that allowed them to transcend the physical universe itself. And somehow, Minho suspected, they were still watching. The Zephyrian fleet moved like a pack of metal wolves through space. jumping from one human world to another, following a trail that grew stranger with each discovery. Admiral Hyunwoo stood in his command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing 17 different star systems, each one telling the same impossible story. "Show me Kepler 442b again," he ordered, and the main display shifted to show a planet that should have been bustling with 3 million human colonists. Instead, it hung silent in space, its cities empty but perfectly preserved, just like all the others. Science Officer Yoon-ji approached with her latest report, her tablet glowing with data that made no sense according to everything the Empire knew about space travel. She'd been working for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, trying to understand what the humans had done. "Admiral, I've analyzed the energy signatures from all 17 worlds," she began, her voice tired but excited. "The humans didn't just evacuate these planets, they transported entire populations across distances that should be impossible." She pulled up a star map showing the human territories. Red lines connected each world, tracing the path the evacuations had taken. "Look at these jump distances, sir. From Earth to their furthest colony is over 8,000 light-years. Our best ships can manage maybe 50 light-years per jump, and that's with our most advanced drive systems." Hyunwoo studied the map, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "You're saying they moved billions of people across the galaxy in a matter of weeks?" "Not just moved them, sir. According to the energy residues I've detected, they did it in single jumps. No staging areas, no refueling stops. Somehow they opened doorways that stretched across impossible distances and stepped through them like walking through a door." The implications were staggering. The Empire had spent centuries developing their jump drive technology, and they were proud of their ability to move fleets across their territory in reasonable time. But if the humans could transport entire civilizations across the galaxy instantly, it meant their technology was centuries ahead of anything the Zephyrians possessed. "There's more, sir," Yoon-ji continued, swiping to bring up detailed scans from their most recent stop. "I've been analyzing the geometric patterns we found carved into their buildings. They're not random symbols. They're mathematical equations describing the curvature of space-time itself." She showed him a 3-dimensional model of one of the patterns, rotating it slowly so he could see how the lines and curves connected. "These formulas are teaching someone how to fold space, how to create shortcuts between distant points in the universe. It's like they left behind instruction manuals for anyone smart enough to read them." The next world they visited was New Busan, a former mining colony that had been home to nearly 10 million humans. Like all the others, it was empty, but this one was different. As Captain Boram led her archaeological team through the main settlement, they found something that changed everything. "Admiral, you need to see this personally." Boram's voice crackled over the communication system from the planet's surface. There was an edge to her voice that Hyunwoo had never heard before, a mixture of excitement and fear that made him decide to beam down immediately. He found Boram standing in what looked like a human research camp built around massive stone. Structures that clearly weren't human-made. The ruins were ancient, covered in strange symbols and made from materials that seemed to shift color in the light. But what caught Hyunwoo's attention was the obvious signs of recent human activity surrounding them. "These are predecessor ruins," Boram explained, gesturing to the towering monuments. "We've found similar structures on dozens of worlds throughout. The galaxy, always empty, always dead. Nobody's ever figured out what they were for, or what happened to the species that built them." She led him to a series of human-built structures surrounding the ancient ruins, laboratories, living quarters, and something that looked like a massive power generation facility. But the humans weren't just studying these ruins, Admiral. They were experimenting with them, activating them somehow. Hyunwoo could see scorch marks on the ancient stones where human equipment had been connected to them. Cables and conduits ran from human generators into slots carved into the alien structures, as if the humans had figured out how to power systems that had been dead for millions of years. "Look at this," Boram said, pointing to a section of the ruins where the stones seemed to shimmer like water. "The humans managed to turn these things on. Whatever the predecessors built here, humanity figured out how to use it." As they explored deeper, they found evidence of extensive human research. Temporary laboratories filled with computers and analysis equipment had been set up inside the ruins themselves. The humans had been taking detailed measurements, running experiments, and apparently succeeding in ways that previous explorers had never managed. "Sir," called out Dr. Jinsu, Borum's lead archaeologist. He was standing beside what looked like a control panel carved from solid stone, but now glowing with soft blue light. "This section is still active. The humans left it running when they evacuated." Hyunwoo approached carefully, feeling a strange tingling in the air around the ancient controls. The symbols on the panel were unlike anything in the Empire's databases, but somehow they seemed almost familiar, as if his mind was trying to understand patterns that existed beyond normal comprehension. "What do you think it does?" he asked. "Based on the energy readings," Jinsu replied, checking his instruments. "I believe it's some kind of transportation system, not a starship, something that moves things without physically traveling through space." As the fleet continued following the human trail, the destinations became increasingly strange. They were moving toward the galactic rim, to regions of space, where stars were few, and the darkness between them stretched for impossible distances. Here their instruments began detecting readings that violated everything they knew about physics. Navigator Tae-hyun was the first to notice the anomalies. He'd been piloting ships for the Empire for over 30 years, and he'd never seen anything like what his sensors were showing him. "Admiral, we have a problem," he announced during their daily briefing. "Our long-range scanners are picking up structures ahead, but they're wrong somehow." He brought up the sensor data on the main display, showing what looked like massive geometric shapes floating in the void between stars. But as Hyunwoo watched, the shapes seemed to flicker, appearing solid one moment and translucent the next. "They appear to exist in multiple dimensions, simultaneously," Tae-hyun continued, his voice uncertain. "Sometimes our sensors detect them as physical objects. Other times they register as energy patterns, and occasionally they don't appear to exist at all." "Could it be sensor malfunction?" Hyunwoo asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "No, sir, I've run full diagnostics 3 times. The sensors are working perfectly. It's space itself that's behaving strangely. Reality seems to be folded somehow in this region." As they moved closer to the galactic edge, the distortions became more pronounced. Stars appeared in places where they shouldn't exist, then vanished when observed directly. Their navigation computers began giving contradictory readings, showing multiple possible locations for the same objects. "It's like the humans found a way to break the rules of reality itself," Yoonji observed during one of their planning sessions. "And whatever they discovered, they're using it to hide somewhere we can't follow using conventional means." The trail was leading them to something beyond the Empire's understanding, something that existed in the spaces between normal reality. And Hyunwoo was beginning to suspect that when they finally found the humans, they would discover that their quarry had become something far more dangerous than a simple enemy to conquer. They had become something that existed beyond the reach of conventional warfare entirely. The edge of the galaxy was a place where normal space seemed to forget its own rules. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Dominion's edge, watching his instruments struggle to make sense of what lay before them. The darkness between stars here was different, not empty, but filled with something that his mind couldn't quite grasp. "Admiral, our sensors are picking up massive structures," reported Lieutenant Jaemin, his voice tight with confusion. "But they keep disappearing and reappearing. It's like they're flickering in and out of reality." On the main view screen, enormous geometric shapes drifted through the void. They looked like crystalline cities or perhaps massive art installations, but they defied every law of physics the Empire had ever discovered. One moment they appeared solid enough to crash into, the next they became translucent as ghosts, and sometimes they vanished entirely, only to reappear somewhere else entirely. "Distance to the nearest structure?" Hyunwoo asked, though he wasn't sure the question even made sense anymore. That's the problem, sir," Jaemin replied, sweat beading on his scaled forehead. "The sensors are giving me readings of anywhere from 50 kilometers to 50,000 kilometers. Sometimes they register as being inside our own ship." The space around them rippled like water disturbed by a stone. Stars that should have been fixed points of light wavered and bent, their light stretching into impossible spirals. The very fabric of reality seemed to be flowing around them, as if they were sailing through a cosmic ocean instead of the vacuum of space. Commander So Young approached from her station, her face pale with worry. "Sir, our navigation systems are completely confused. We're getting readings that suggest we're in 17 different locations simultaneously, and some of those locations appear to be inside other dimensions." Hyun-Woo felt a chill run down his spine. In 3 centuries of space travel, the Empire had encountered many strange phenomena, but nothing that challenged their basic understanding of reality itself. "Are we in any immediate danger?" "Unknown, sir. Our threat detection systems can't decide if we're surrounded by hostile forces or floating in empty space. The computer keeps switching between battle alert and all-clear status." That's when Communications Officer Hai-Jin suddenly straightened at her station, her eyes wide with shock. "Admiral, I'm receiving a transmission," she announced, her voice trembling. "But it's not coming from any specific direction. It's like the signal is coming from everywhere at once." "Put it through," Hyun-Woo ordered, though he braced himself for whatever they might hear. The voice that filled the bridge was unmistakably human, but it carried strange harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. It spoke in perfect Zephyrian, but with an accent that suggested the speaker was remembering the language from a great distance. "Welcome, children of Zephyr," the voice said, and Hyun-Woo felt the words echo, not just in his ears, but somehow in his thoughts. "We have been waiting for you to arrive. Your journey has been long and we know you have many questions." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Every crew member stared at the speakers, waiting for more. "Who are you?" Hyun-Woo finally asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "We are what humanity has become," the voice replied, "though individual names seem less important now than they once did. You may call me Jin-Woo if names help you understand. We were once like you, bound to single bodies limited to one place at a time, trapped by the boundaries of physical existence." Commander So Young checked her instruments frantically. "Admiral, the energy signatures we're detecting, they're not coming from any ships or stations. They're coming from the voice itself, from the humans themselves." As if responding to her words, the air in the center of the bridge began to shimmer. Light gathered there, not the harsh white light of their ship systems, but something softer and more complex, light that seemed to contain colors that had no names. The light coalesced into a roughly human shape, tall and familiar in its proportions, but clearly no longer made of flesh and bone. The being that stood before them was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly. Its form shifted constantly, sometimes appearing solid enough to touch, other times seeming to exist as pure energy. When it moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around it, as if space itself was making room for something that no longer quite belonged in normal dimensions. "This is impossible," whispered So Young. "Matter can't exist in that state. Energy can't hold a coherent form without some kind of containment field." The being that called itself Jin-Woo turned toward her, and when it smiled, the expression was somehow both human and alien. "You are correct, Commander. By the laws of physics, as you understand them, we should not exist. But the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than your science has yet discovered." "What happened to your people?" Hyun-Woo demanded. "Where are the billions of humans who lived on those worlds?" "We are here," Jin-Woo replied, gesturing to the empty space around them. "All of us. We discovered that physical existence is merely one way of being among many. What you call the Great Departure was our evolution beyond the need for bodies, beyond the limitations of single locations, beyond the boundaries that separate one consciousness from another." The being's form flickered, and for a moment, Hyun-Woo thought he saw not one figure but thousands, all occupying the same space without interfering with each other. Men, women, children, elderly, all of humanity existing as overlapping patterns of light and thought. "Your empire came seeking to conquer us," Jin-Woo continued. "But how do you conquer beings who exist in dimensions you cannot reach? How do you rule over people who are no longer bound by the physical laws that govern your weapons and ships?" "The worlds we found," Hyun-Woo said slowly, pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. "You left them intact on purpose." "Of course, they were a test, Admiral. A challenge to see whether your species would learn from our example or simply repeat the same patterns of domination and conquest that have limited your growth for centuries. So Young stepped forward, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. The technology you removed from your worlds, the geometric patterns you left behind, they were instructions, weren't they? A roadmap for other species to follow. Jinwoo nodded, and the motion sent ripples through the fabric of space around them. Every species faces the same choice eventually. Continue to fight over limited resources and territories, or learn to transcend the physical limitations that create scarcity in the first place. We chose evolution. The question is, what will you choose? The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire had come to conquer humanity, but they had found something far more challenging than an enemy to defeat. They had found teachers offering a lesson that could transform their entire civilization. Your arrival was anticipated, Jinwoo said softly. We knew that eventually someone would follow our trail. We hoped it would be fellow explorers seeking knowledge rather than conquerors seeking dominion. But either way, the choice is now yours to make. Around them, the impossible structures continued their strange dance through folded space, and Hyunwoo realized that everything he thought he knew about power, about conquest, about the nature of existence itself was about to change forever. The silence on the bridge stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap at any moment. Admiral Hyunwoo stared at the being of light that had once been human, his mind racing through 3 centuries of military training that suddenly seemed completely useless. Every strategy he'd ever learned, every battle he'd ever fought, every victory the Empire had claimed, none of it mattered when facing an enemy that had evolved beyond the very concept of warfare. Jinwoo's form shifted gently, the patterns of energy that made up his existence flowing like water made of starlight. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of billions of souls speaking as one. Admiral, your empire stands at the same crossroads that humanity faced not long ago, he said, gesturing to the impossible structures that drifted through folded space around them. You can continue down the path of conquest, adding world after world to your collection, growing larger and stronger in the traditional sense, but growth without evolution is just another form of death. What do you mean? Hyunwoo asked, though part of him already feared the answer. How many species has your empire conquered in the past 3 centuries? Jinwoo asked in return. How many worlds have you claimed? How many civilizations have you absorbed? Hyunwoo's mandibles clicked, unconsciously. Hundreds, maybe thousands. We've brought order and unity to this entire sector of the galaxy. And what has it brought you? Are your people happier? Are they wiser? Are they closer to understanding the true nature of existence? Jinwoo's form brightened slightly, and when he continued, there was something almost like sadness in his voice. Or are they simply larger versions of what they were before, more numerous, more spread out, but not fundamentally changed? The question hit Hyunwoo like a physical blow. In all his years of service, he'd never questioned the Empire's basic mission. Conquest meant progress. Expansion meant success. More worlds meant more power. And more power meant... what, exactly? We offer you a choice, Jinwoo continued. Continue your path of conquest and face the same stagnation that eventually drove us to seek something greater, or accept guidance toward your own transformation. Learn to exist beyond the limitations that currently bind you. Commander So Young stepped forward, her face pale but determined. And if we refuse? If we decide to return to our empire and report what we found here? Jinwoo's form flickered, and for a moment the bridge was filled with the presence of countless human souls, all looking at them with expressions of infinite patience and compassion. Then you will return, and your empire will likely decide that we represent a threat that must be eliminated. You will send your fleets and your weapons against us, and you will discover that all your military might means nothing against beings who exist beyond physical reality. The implications were staggering. Hyunwoo realized with growing horror that humanity's apparent weakness had been nothing but preparation for something unimaginably greater. All those empty worlds, all that abandoned technology, all those geometric patterns carved into stone, they had been breadcrumbs leading to this moment. Your weapons cannot hurt us, Jinwu explained gently. Your ships cannot catch us. Your strategies cannot anticipate us. Not because we are hostile, but because we exist in dimensions your military thinking cannot comprehend. You would be fighting shadows while we watch from realms you cannot even perceive. Lieutenant Jamin, who had been silent throughout the encounter, suddenly stepped forward. His young face was filled with wonder and something that looked like longing. What would transformation mean for us? What would we become? Jinwu turned to the young officer, and his energy form seemed to brighten with approval. You would become more than you ever imagined possible, free from the limitations of single bodies, able to exist anywhere in the universe instantly, connected to all knowledge and all experience. Death would become meaningless because consciousness cannot be destroyed. Scarcity would end, because energy beings need no physical resources. It sounds too good to be true, So Young said suspiciously. What's the catch? The catch, Jinwu replied with what might have been a smile, is that you must be willing to let go of everything you think you are. Your physical forms, your individual separateness, your attachment to material possessions and physical pleasures, you must be willing to become something fundamentally different from what you were. The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. Yanwu could see the conflict playing out on their faces, wonder warring with fear, curiosity battling with loyalty to their old ways of life. I want to try, Jamin said suddenly, his voice shaking but determined. I want to know what it's like to exist beyond these limitations. Jamin, no, So Young protested. We don't know if the process can be reversed. We don't know if you'd still be you afterward. Commander, the young officer replied, look at where our current path has led us. 3 centuries of conquest. And what do we have to show for it? More territory to defend, more enemies to fight, more reasons to build bigger weapons. When does it end? Several other crew members stepped forward, their faces showing the same mixture of fear and fascination. They were young, mostly, officers who had grown up hearing stories of the Empire's glorious conquests, but had begun to question whether glory was worth the endless cycle of violence. But others, including So Young, moved back toward the exit. I'm sorry, Admiral, she said. I can't do this. I need to return to familiar space to report what we've found. The High Command needs to know. Hyunwoo found himself torn between 2 groups, those ready to embrace transformation and those desperate to return to the certainty of their old lives. The choice before him was more than personal. It would determine the future of his entire species. What do I tell the High Command? He asked Jinwu. How do I explain what we've found? Here, tell them the truth, Jinwu replied. Tell them that true strength lies not in the ability to conquer others, but in the wisdom to know when to transform yourself. Tell them that we offer knowledge, not subjugation, evolution, not destruction, growth beyond anything they have ever imagined. The being's form began to fade slightly, as if preparing to return to whatever dimension he normally inhabited. But most importantly, tell them that the choice is theirs to make. We will not force transformation on anyone. We will not invade their worlds or threaten their people. We will simply exist here at the edge of reality, waiting for those who are ready to take the next step in their development. As the Dominion's edge prepared to return to Zephyrian space, Hyunwoo stood at the crossroads of his civilization's future. Half his crew had chosen to remain with the humans, ready to begin their own transformation into beings of pure energy and consciousness. The other half waited nervously for the journey home, clutching their familiar weapons and old certainties. The choice he would recommend to the High Command would echo through generations. Should the Empire kneel? Not to humanity as conquerors, but to humanity as teachers. Should they humble themselves to learn from a species they had thought to easily dominate, or would pride and fear drive them to launch a futile war against beings who had transcended the very concept of warfare? As the ship turned away from the galaxy's edge, Hyunwoo carried with him the weight of his species' destiny. The stars watched silently, eternal witnesses to the moment when the Zephyrian Empire would choose between wisdom and destruction, between evolution and stagnation, between becoming something greater or remaining forever trapped in the limitations of their physical existence. The future remained unwritten, waiting for courage to triumph over fear and wisdom to overcome pride.